2 months ago, Pastor Nathan Brooks told his small Nebraska congregation he was leaving for a mission trip, but his old Ford truck never moved from the driveway. Nights later, a neighbor noticed the upstairs bedroom light burning long after he was supposed to be gone. When police finally entered the house, they found a sealed room, a hidden letter, and a truth buried deeper than anyone imagined. The town of Fairview, Nebraska was the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked, and everyone knew each other's business, whether they wanted to or not. It wasn't a big town, nor was it particularly remarkable, but it had its rhythms, its seasons, and its figures of quiet influence. Among them, no one was more respected than Pastor Nathan Brooks. For over 20 years, Nathan had served at the small white-steepled church that sat at the corner of Main and Pine. He was a steady presence, tall, lean, always in a pressed shirt, his warm baritone voice a source of comfort to many in the congregation. He had officiated weddings, presided over funerals, and visited the sick at Fairview General more times than anyone could count. His kindness was unquestioned, which was why, when word spread that Pastor Brooks was leaving on an extended mission trip to Central America, the entire town came out to bid him farewell. It was a bright Sunday morning, unusually warm for early October. The church service was packed. Nathan had delivered a heartfelt sermon about faith in times of change. Afterward, there had been hugs, handshakes, and well wishes in the fellowship hall. By evening, everyone assumed he was gone. That was the last anyone saw of him. 3 days later, Margaret Avery, Nathan's next-door neighbor and unofficial town busybody, noticed something odd. From her kitchen window, she could see Nathan's old green Ford F-150 still parked in his driveway. The truck hadn't moved since Sunday. Curious, Margaret mentioned it casually to her friend Carol at the bakery. "I thought Nathan was supposed to be off to Guatemala or somewhere by now," she said, stirring her coffee. "Well, maybe he got a ride to the airport," Carol replied, brushing flour from her hands. "Could be." But Margaret wasn't satisfied with that answer. She'd seen Nathan loading boxes into the truck earlier that week. Why leave the truck behind if he had planned to drive himself to Omaha for the flight, as he'd told several parishioners? That night, after dinner, she couldn't help but glance across the street again. It was just after 9 p.m. The house was dark, except for one window. The faint glow of a lamp burned steadily against the night. Margaret frowned. The next morning the truck was still there. The same light in the same window came on again as dusk fell. 3 nights in a row now the pattern repeated. By Friday, Margaret's curiosity turned to concern. She called the church secretary, Donna Mills, to inquire, "Donna, I hate to be a bother, but have you heard from Pastor Brooks since Sunday?" There was a pause on the line. "No, not since he left," Donna said. "He texted me a short goodbye, said he'd check in once he got settled." Margaret's unease deepened. "Did anyone take him to the airport?" "Not that I know of," Donna said slowly. "He was supposed to drive himself." After hanging up, Margaret debated her next move. She wasn't one to involve the police lightly, but something felt off. She called Deputy Jim Keller, a family friend. The Saturday morning, Jim paid a visit to the house. The front porch was clean, the mail neatly stacked in the box. Nothing looked disturbed, but the Ford was still there, and the bedroom light came on again that evening as if someone were keeping vigil. Keller knocked at the door. No answer. He circled the property but found nothing out of place. Just as he was about to leave, Margaret hurried over. "Jim, please, this isn't like Nathan. Something's wrong. That light, it's been on every night." Keller agreed to make some calls. The following day, he reached out to the church board and finally contacted Nathan's sister in Des Moines. She, too, was puzzled. She hadn't heard from Nathan since his supposed departure. "He always lets me know when he lands," she said. With no contact and mounting concerns, Keller obtained permission to enter the house on Monday. The interior was immaculate. Nathan was known for his orderliness. His packed suitcase still sat by the door. His passport was on the desk, untouched. The Ford keys were on the kitchen counter. Upstairs, the source of the bedroom light was found, a lamp on a timer. Odd, because no one remembered Nathan mentioning such a setup. It looked almost deliberate, as if someone wanted to create the illusion that he was home. No other signs of disturbance were present, no forced entry, no missing valuables. But Pastor Brooks was nowhere to be found. News of the odd discovery spread quickly through Fairview. the whispers began. Why would he leave without his truck? Who turned on that lamp? Did he really leave town at all? What started as a routine mission trip now hovered over the town as a growing mystery. In the days that followed, Keller would begin piecing together a case more tangled than anyone in Fairview could have imagined. News of Pastor Brooks's puzzling disappearance rippled through Fairview like an unexpected storm cloud over an otherwise bright autumn sky. The discovery of his untouched belongings inside the house only deepened the unease that had started to settle over the town. Conversations in grocery store aisles, whispers during Sunday service, and speculative exchanges over coffee all circled the same questions. Why would Nathan leave everything behind? Who was turning the bedroom light on each night? Was he truly gone, or had something more sinister occurred? Amid this growing chorus of uncertainty, one woman found herself unable to shake a gnawing sense of dread. Marlene Abbott had been a devoted member of Fairview Community Church for over 30 years. In her late 60s, with silver-streaked hair pinned into a practical bun, she carried herself with the trials of life. Marlene wasn't just another parishioner. For the past 5 years, she had volunteered to clean the pastor's home once a week, a small act of service she took great pride in. She knew Nathan's routines well, the exact way he liked his books aligned on the shelf, the faint scent of cedar he used to polish the pews, the gentle cadence of his footsteps upstairs when she vacuumed below. On the Thursday following Keller's initial entry into the house, Marlene was granted permission to help tidy up. Under the deputy's watchful eye, the church board felt the place should be kept in order until Nathan's whereabouts were clarified, and no one knew the house better than Marlene. Clutching her cleaning tote, she approached the house with a heavy heart. Unlocking the front door with a spare key provided by Donna Mills, she stepped inside. The air felt colder than it should have, even with the crisp weather outside. Dust had begun to gather on the surfaces, an unusual sight in a home Nathan had always kept immaculate. As she moved through the living room and kitchen, her practiced hands wiped down counters and dusted picture frames, but her gaze kept drifting toward the staircase. Upstairs, she had seen the strange reports, the light in the bedroom, the untouched suitcase. Though uneasy, Marlene felt compelled to ensure everything was in order. Climbing the stairs slowly, her heart beat a little faster with each step. The hallway upstairs was silent, streamed through the curtains at the far end, illuminating motes of dust that floated lazily in the air. At the end of the hall stood the pastor's bedroom door. Marlene approached, but as she reached out to grasp the handle, her fingers stopped short. Something was wrong. The doorframe was rimmed with a faint, hardened line, a glossy sheen that caught the light at certain angles. Frowning, she leaned closer and saw it, a thick band of industrial adhesive sealing the edges of the door, reinforced by strips of paper stuck along the seams, as if someone had deliberately attempted to create an airtight barrier from the inside. Her breath caught. This wasn't a repair job. This wasn't something Nathan would have done. Panic warred with her instinct to preserve the sanctity of the space. Summoning her resolve, she hurried downstairs to find Deputy Keller. Within the hour, Keller arrived with a small tool set and Marlene hovering anxiously behind him. With a utility knife, he carefully scored through the hardened adhesive, peeling back the sealed paper strip by strip. The smell hit them first, a faint but acrid scent, like stale chemicals mixed with old wood. Slowly, the door creaked open. The room beyond looked almost untouched, save for a thick layer of dust along the windowsill and an unsettling stillness in the air. The bed was neatly made, a folded gray blanket resting at its foot. On the nightstand beside the bed lay Nathan's personal Bible, a battered, well-thumbed volume bound in worn black leather. It was widely known among the congregation that Pastor Brooks carried that Bible everywhere. It had accompanied him through hospital visits, funerals, even his sermons. The fact that it remained here, abandoned, sent a chill through Marlene's bones. Unable to resist, she stepped closer, peering at the open pages. The Bible was opened deliberately to a specific passage in the Gospel of John. Her eyes traced the words with growing unease. "And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light, and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed." Mary gasped softly. The words seemed less like an accident and more like a message or a warning. She exchanged a tense glance with Keller, who took careful photographs of the scene. The adhesive seal, the deliberate positioning of the Bible, the absence of the pastor, each element added a new layer to the growing mystery. Keller's brow furrowed as he surveyed the room. "This isn't someone preparing for a trip," he murmured. "This is someone preparing for something else, entirely." Downstairs, the faint ticking of the hallway clock marked the passage of time, indifferent to the undercurrent of dread now saturating the house. Marlene stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the ominous passage. She had spent her life drawing comfort from these words, but now they felt like a cipher, one she wasn't sure she wanted to understand. As Keller continued his examination, neither of them noticed the subtle shift of air from beneath the bedroom dresser, or the faint scrape of something shifting below the floorboards, just out of sight. The sealed bedroom and the chilling words left open in Pastor Brooks' Bible sent a ripple of deeper unease through the small community of Fairview. Word traveled quickly from Keller's report, and by Sunday, conversations shifted from innocent concern to wary suspicion. Yet even with these troubling discoveries, no clear answers emerged. Pastor Brooks' whereabouts remained unknown. That following Monday morning, while Deputy Keller reviewed case notes in his small office at the Fairview Sheriff's Department, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered with his usual gruff tone. "Sheriff's Department, Keller speaking." A hesitant voice came through the line. Hi, this is Eric Raymond. I'm Pastor Brooks' nephew. I just heard about what's going on from my mom. I think there's something you should know." Keller straightened in his chair. "Go on, Mr. Raymond." "I live in Kansas City," Eric continued, voice trembling slightly. "Uncle Nathan sent me a letter about 2 weeks ago. A real letter. I thought it was odd because he usually emails or calls. It sounded different." "Different how?" Keller asked, pen already poised over a legal pad. "Like he was scared," Eric said quietly. Wrote that he'd been having strange dreams, that things from his past were coming back to him, and that he was afraid his old sins, his words, were about to catch up with him. I thought he was just having a rough patch or something. Now, I don't know." Keller's pulse quickened. "Do you still have that letter?" "Yes. I can scan it and send it to you." "Good. Do that as soon as possible," Keller instructed. After confirming Eric's contact information, Keller hung up and exhaled. Another piece of a puzzle that seemed to get darker with each new turn. A few hours later, the email arrived with a scanned image of a handwritten letter on plain cream stationery. Keller read it carefully. "Dear Eric, there are things in this life I have buried so deeply I sometimes convince myself they were never real. But the past is persistent. It whispers louder with age. I fear that certain sins, long thought forgotten, are returning. I must face them alone. Do not worry, and do not come looking for me. Remember always that you are loved. Uncle Nathan." Keller reread the letter 3 times, each pass tightening the knot in his chest. It confirmed what Marlene and others had sensed. Nathan hadn't planned a simple mission trip. He had intended something else entirely, something personal and possibly dangerous. Determined to pursue every angle, Keller arranged to pull surveillance footage from neighboring properties around the pastor's house. The homes on Maple Lane weren't exactly high-tech, but a few residents had recently installed basic security cameras, mostly as a deterrent after a string of minor vehicle break-ins that past summer. Keller spent the better part of Tuesday coordinating with neighbors and downloading hours of footage. Late that afternoon, seated at his desk in the dim light of his office, he began combing through the files. For the first 2 nights following Nathan's supposed departure, nothing appeared unusual. Squirrels, stray cats, an occasional passing car, but then at 2:43 a.m. on the night before the pastor was reported missing, one clip caught Keller's attention. The side camera of the Hensley residence, which faced toward the rear alley behind Nathan's house, captured a blurry figure emerging from the pastor's backyard. The motion sensor triggered, causing the video to begin mid-action. The figure, cloaked in darkness and wearing what appeared to be a long coat, moved slowly and deliberately toward the alley. The footage was grainy and distorted under the poor lighting, but one thing was clear. The figure exited through the pastor's back gate and vanished down the alley, heading away from any main road. Keller replayed the footage again and again, adjusting the contrast and brightness in vain attempts to sharpen the image. The face remained obscured, the gait ambiguous. It could have been Nathan. It could have been someone else entirely. No clear determination could be made. Keller leaned back in his chair, rubbing tired eyes. He knew what this suggested. If Nathan had left under the cover of night, why the elaborate ruse with the light and the sealed bedroom? And if it wasn't Nathan who had entered and perhaps exited his home? The questions swirled faster now, each one pulling the case further from the realm of the explainable. He picked up his phone and called Donna Mills. "Donna, do you know if Pastor Brooks had any recent visitors? Anyone unusual stopping by in the past month?" Donna paused. "Well, not that I know of. He mentioned his nephew was going to visit for Thanksgiving, but that was still weeks away. And I haven't seen anyone else." Keller thanked her and ended the call, his mind racing. The letter, the shadowed figure, the sealed room, the ominous scripture, all pointed to a man grappling with something beyond the community's understanding. Yet the presence of an unknown person that night opened a darker possibility, that perhaps Pastor Brooks hadn't gone willingly at all. And if someone else had been involved, Fairview's quiet streets might conceal more secrets than anyone had dared to imagine. Keller returned to the video, frame by frame, searching for any missed detail, unaware that across town, in the cold confines of the church's storage room, another discovery was about to cast new light on Nathan Brooks' carefully hidden past. The shadowy figure, captured on the neighbor's camera, deepened the mystery around Pastor Brooks's disappearance, leaving Deputy Keller more determined than ever to uncover what lay beneath the polished surface of Nathan's seemingly ordinary life. The letter to Eric Raymond haunted him. The words about old sins hinted at a past far more complex than anyone in Fairview had suspected. Now, with this added layer of potential intrusion on the night before Nathan vanished, Keller knew they needed to conduct a more thorough search of the house, particularly the sealed bedroom, which had already yielded unsettling clues. Early Wednesday morning, Keller returned to the house with Detective Sarah Grayson from the county's Major Crimes Unit. Grayson was sharp-eyed and meticulous, known for seeing patterns others missed. Together, they prepared to examine every inch of Nathan's bedroom, this time with tools and forensic equipment in tow. "You think there's something else here?" Grayson asked as she pulled on a pair of gloves. Keller nodded grimly. "If there is, this is where we'll find it." They began with the obvious, inspecting the sealed doorframe again, photographing every detail of the adhesive residue. Then Grayson crouched to examine the floorboards near the bed. "Something's off," she murmured. "There's fresh scarring along the edges of this plank. See here? It's been lifted recently." Keller knelt beside her, running his fingers along the seam. The wood was slightly warped, as if someone had forced it open and hastily closed it again. With care, they pried the board loose. Beneath it, hidden in the subfloor cavity, lay a small trapdoor secured with a simple latch. A faint layer of dust suggested it hadn't been used often, but recent tool marks marred the edges. Grayson flicked fronts open. "Ready?" Keller nodded. Slowly, they opened the trapdoor. The beam of the flashlight revealed a narrow shaft descending about 6 feet, just enough room for a person to crouch and move through. A crude wooden ladder led down. The air that wafted upward was cool and tinged with the acrid scent of freshly cured cement. Grayson descended first, with Keller close behind. The space below was cramped, a dirt-walled crawlspace barely tall enough to stand in. A few feet in, the tunnel abruptly ended in a rough concrete wall. The surface of the cement was clean and smooth, clearly poured within the past few weeks. Grayson ran her gloved hand along the wall. "This is new," she confirmed. "Whoever did this didn't want anyone going further." Keller's jaw tightened. The existence of this hidden space and the deliberate effort to seal part of it raised even darker questions. What had Nathan hidden here? And why had he sealed it so recently? With no immediate way to breach the concrete without specialized tools, they documented the area carefully and prepared to continue their search upstairs. Back in the bedroom, Gracie turned her attention to the large antique armoire in the corner. It was a heavy piece, seldom moved, its surface worn smooth by years of use. As she opened the doors, a faint metallic click sounded from within. One of the drawers was locked. "You got pics?" she asked. Keller produced a small kit from his pocket. Within moments, the lock clicked open. Inside the drawer, nestled beneath a stack of old church bulletins, lay a battered leather suitcase. Dust coated its surface, but the clasps showed signs of recent handling. Grayson carefully lifted it out and set it on the bed. "Let's see what we've got," she said quietly. Keller held his breath as she unlatched the suitcase. Inside, neatly packed, were dozens of black and white and faded color photographs, most of them old family scenes, children at play, school portraits, church gatherings. Some were labeled on the back in a neat, unfamiliar hand. Beneath the stack of photos, Grayson uncovered a manila folder thick with documents. The label, yellowed and brittle, read, "Case File, Missing Child, Kansas, 1997. Keller's pulse quickened. They opened the folder to reveal photocopied police reports, newspaper clippings, and hand-scrawled notes. The missing child was a boy named Ethan Raymond, age 10 at the time of disappearance. The file included composite sketches, witness statements, and several grainy surveillance stores from a long-closed convenience store. The boy's last known location was a small town 2 states away from Fairview. "Raymond," Keller whispered. "Same last name as the nephew." Grayson flipped through the documents. "This kid vanished over 20 years ago. No body ever found. Case went cold." She held up a photograph of the boy. Even through the grainy print, the child's features were unmistakable. Ginger hair, sharp blue eyes, a solemn expression. Keller's stomach turned. The resemblance to a younger Pastor Brooks was undeniable. "Jesus," he muttered. "What the hell was Nathan doing with this?" Grayson shook her head. "It's not just curiosity. These aren't copies you'd find online. Some of these look like originals, things only law enforcement or family would have." They sat in heavy silence, the weight of their discovery pressing down like a physical force. Keller knew instinctively that this was no coincidence. The missing boy, the sealed crossbase, the cryptic letter to Eric, and now this hidden suitcase, all pointed toward a truth buried deeper than any of them had imagined. And whatever that truth was, someone had gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. Keller exhaled slowly, eyes drifting back to the cold, concrete-sealed tunnel below the floorboards. "We're going to need to break through that wall," he said, voice low, "and soon." Grayson nodded, already making a mental list of what they'd need. Neither spoke of it aloud, but both knew one thing. The deeper they dug into Pastor Nathan Brooks' life, the further they were descending into shadows they might never fully escape. The suitcase lay open on the bed, like a vault of buried truths, its contents pulling Deputy Keller and Detective Grayson deeper into a narrative neither of them yet fully understood. The file on the missing boy, Ethan Raymond, already suggested a disturbing connection to Pastor Brooks, but the full scope of that connection remained elusive. Determined to glean more, Grayson began carefully cataloging the photographs, while Keller sifted through the loose papers. Hours passed in tense silence, interrupted only by the occasional click of a camera documenting each item. Then Grayson's sharp intake of breath broke the quiet. "Keller, look at this." She held out a faded color photograph, the edges worn soft by time. The image depicted a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, standing in front of a white clapboard church strikingly similar to Fairview Community Church. The boy had ginger hair and piercing blue eyes, a solemn expression that seemed to weigh far heavier than his age should allow. He wore a neatly pressed shirt and dark slacks, hands clasped awkwardly in front of him. Keller stared at the photograph, his throat tightening. The resemblance to a young Nathan Brooks was unmistakable. "Check the back," Grayson prompted. Keller turned the photo over. In neat handwriting, faded but legible, were the words, "Ethan R., Easter Sunday, 1997. Keller's pulse hammered in his ears. "It's him," he said hoarsely. "It's got to be him," Grayson nodded grimly. "The timing fits the scene, Majors Brooks now. But why change his identity?" Keller muttered. "And how the hell did he end up here as a pastor?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. They knew they needed to verify what they were seeing. Grayson immediately contacted the Records Division to request background checks and birth certificates on both Nathan Brooks and Ethan Raymond. Meanwhile, Keller began cross-referencing every known detail from the missing child file with Nathan's public records. The results came back faster than expected, and they were damning. No official birth record existed for a Nathan Brooks born in Nebraska or any of the neighboring states, despite Brooks having claimed Nebraska as his place of birth on numerous legal documents. His Social Security number traced back only to an application filed in 2002, when Brooks would have been in his mid-teens if his stated age was accurate. Even more troubling, that application had been processed under circumstances flagged as irregular in the system, with inconsistencies noted in supporting documentation. Grayson tapped the report thoughtfully. No birth certificate, no early school records. His paper trail starts when he was already an adolescent. Keller exhaled slowly, the pieces beginning to align in a dark, inevitable pattern. He's Ethan Raymond. He has to be. Changed his name, started fresh. Grayson glanced back at the photo and buried the past so deep he thought no one would ever find it. The implications were staggering. If Pastor Brooks was indeed Ethan Raymond, then the case of the missing child had never been solved because the child had never truly vanished. He had simply reinvented himself under a new identity. But that begged even more questions. Why had he run? What had happened to drive a 10-year-old boy to disappear and assume a new life? And why, after so many years, had the weight of that past begun to resurface now? As they prepared to dig further, Grayson paused, a new thought dawning. "We need to cross-record the safety directors here," she said. "If he's been keeping this secret for that long, there might be traces of it even in his work. Patterns, omissions, things he deliberately avoided." Keller agreed, reached out to Donald Mills again, requesting access to every document Nathan had ever filed as pastor, membership lists, baptism records, marriage licenses, even old sermon notes. The hours that followed were consumed with poring through file boxes stacked in the church's modest back office. Late that evening, as fatigue began to wear on them, Gracie uncovered an older church directory from 2005, the year Nathan Brooks had first arrived in Fairview. The entry for Pastor Brooks included a brief biography. It mentioned that he had transferred from a seminary in Kansas, though no specific institution was listed. More curiously, his personal section listed no family, no hometown, and no prior church affiliations, an odd omission for someone in his position. Grayson tapped the page. "See this? He left this intentionally vague. No roots." Keller nodded grimly, and yet here he was, building a life on a foundation of lies. They both knew the next step was clear. They needed to verify the seminary connection, if it even existed, and dig deeper into Kansas state records. The link to Kansas wasn't coincidence. Ethan Raymond had disappeared from Kansas. Now it seemed clear that's where Nathan Brooks had emerged. As they prepared to leave the church for the night, Grayson paused at the doorway, her gaze drifting back to the photograph of the boy in front of the church. "He was running from something," she said softly, "and whatever it was, he finally decided it had caught up with him." Keller said nothing. In the stillness of the darkened church office, the unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. They had uncovered a parallel past that had remained hidden for decades. But what lay beyond that sealed concrete wall beneath Nathan's bedroom floor still awaited them, and Keller suspected it held the answers they feared most. The revelation that Nathan Brooks might in fact be Ethan Raymond sent shockwaves through every layer of the investigation. For Deputy Keller and Detective Grayson, the tangled web of missing identities and buried secrets now demanded answers that reached beyond official channels. While they pursued leads through formal law enforcement databases, an unexpected source of help emerged from within Fairview's own congregation. Martin Hale was not a detective by trade. A retired high school history teacher with a passion for genealogy and local archives, Martin had long served as the unofficial historian of Fairview Community Church. He was a familiar face at every church event, his quiet presence often overlooked amid the bustle. But when word of the missing child file and the discovery of the photograph reached him, something stirred in the meticulous researcher's mind. Without fanfare, Martin set to work. Alone in his cluttered study, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers and genealogy books, he began tracing every public record he could access online. It was during one such late-night session that he stumbled upon an archived newspaper article from the Topeka Herald, dated May 1997. The headline read, "Mother and son vanish after domestic violence incident. Police seek public's help." The article detailed the case of 10-year-old Ethan Raymond and his mother, Clara Raymond, who had disappeared following a reported domestic assault involving Clara's estranged husband, Charles Raymond. According to the article, neighbors had called police after hearing screams from the Raymond residence. Officers arrived to find signs of a violent struggle, but no trace of Clara or Ethan. Charles Raymond, identified as the prime suspect, had evaded capture and was presumed to have fled the state. The case had gone cold within a year. Martin's heart pounded as he read and reread the article. The timeline aligned perfectly. Ethan would have been 10 in 1997, placing him in his mid-30s now, the same as Nathan Brooks. More importantly, the boy's photograph included with the article was a younger version of the child in the photo Keller and Grayson had found. Without hesitation, Martin printed the article and drove to the sheriff's department the next morning. He arrived breathless, clutching the paper. "You need to see this," he told Keller, laying the article on his desk. Keller and Grayson read in stunned silence. "This fits," Grayson said softly. "It explains the Kansas connection, the missing records, everything?" "We need confirmation," Keller said. DNA nodded. The conversation that followed was brief but decisive. They would collect a sample from one of Nathan's personal items to cross-check against the National Missing Persons database. Back at the house, Keller and Grayson returned to the bedroom, careful to disturb nothing unnecessarily. Grayson's eyes scanned the room until they landed on a wooden hairbrush resting atop the dresser. "This will do," she said, carefully placing the brush into an evidence bag. Back at the lab, technicians meticulously extracted hair samples from the brush. Days passed in agonizing anticipation. Then, on a gray Monday morning, the call came. Grayson answered and listened intently. When she hung up, her expression was grave. "It's confirmed," she told Keller. "DNA matches the file for Ethan Raymond. 99.9% certainty. Pastor Nathan Brooks is Ethan Raymond." The words settled heavily between them. The mystery of the pastor's identity had been solved, but the implications were staggering. For 2 decades, Ethan had lived under an assumed name, building a new life from the ashes of whatever horror had driven him and his mother into hiding. Yet the question remained, what had finally driven him to unravel that carefully constructed wall beneath the floorboards? "Whatever's behind that wall," he said, voice low. "I think it holds the rest of the story." Grayson nodded in agreement. There was no turning back now. The DNA confirmation shook the small town of Fairview to its core, though only a handful of people knew the truth so far. For Deputy Keller and Detective Grayson, the revelation that Pastor Nathan Brooks was indeed the long-missing Ethan Raymond cast every action he'd taken under a new and haunting light. Yet the deeper question remained, why had he hidden this past for so long? And what had finally driven him to disappear? They both knew that whatever had prompted this unraveling would likely be connected to what still lay behind that sealed concrete wall beneath the bedroom floor. But before they could move forward with breaching the wall, another clue surfaced in an unexpected place, through the voice of a neighbor who had seen something no one had previously mentioned. The morning after the DNA results came in, Keller stopped by Margaret Avery's house to keep her updated, partly to manage the inevitable rumor mill already beginning to churn. As he sat at her small kitchen table sipping weak coffee, Margaret leaned in, lowering her voice. "You know, there's something I didn't think to mention before," she began hesitantly. "It might not mean anything, but now, well, now I'm not so sure." Keller set his cup down. "Go ahead, Margaret. Anything could help." She folded her hands tightly. "About 2 months ago, in late August, I saw a woman visiting Nathan's house. Older woman, thin, frail-looking, long silver hair. I'd never seen her before around town." Keller's brow furrowed quietly. "You're certain it wasn't someone from the congregation?" Margaret shook her head firmly. "Find out everyone who comes and goes from that house. This woman wasn't local. She arrived mid-afternoon in an old sedan. Looked like she'd been driving a long way. I watched her knock on the door, and Nathan let her in. The porch light came on around 7 that evening, but it stayed on all night. The next morning, her car was gone, but no one saw her leave. And I haven't seen her since." Keller sat back, the weight of her words settling in. "And you didn't think to mention this before?" Margaret flushed slightly. I didn't think it mattered at the time. I thought maybe it was a distant relative or a friend from the past, but now I wonder." Keller thanked her, mind already racing. The timeline fit perfectly. If the visitor had arrived 2 months ago, it was just before the letter to Eric had been sent, just before Nathan's behavior seemed to shift dramatically. As he relayed this new information to Grayson later that afternoon, she nodded grimly. If that woman was his mother, that would explain a lot. The letter, the sealed room, the preparations, and the timing of his disappearance, Keller added. Need to find out who she was, while Grayson began coordinating with Kansas law enforcement to check for any trace of Clara Raymond resurfacing. Keller returned to the pastor's house, determined to comb through every remaining inch of the bedroom for more clues. It was during this meticulous search that he found the next piece of the puzzle, hidden in plain sight. Keller lifted it, then reached beneath. His fingers brushed the edge of a slim, leather-bound journal. He drew it out carefully. The cover was cracked with age and bore no title. Inside, neat and deliberate handwriting filled each page. Most entries were mundane reflections on sermons, scripture, and daily life. But as Keller neared the more recent pages, the tone shifted sharply. Flipping to the final entries, he read with mounting tension. August 24th. She came today. After all these years, the ghost I have run from my whole life, my mother, I scarcely recognized her. Time has stolen so much from her, yet her eyes, those eyes I see in my own reflection, are unchanged. We spoke long into the night. She carries her own ghosts, her own sins, but this time she did not weep. Keller's heart pounded as he continued reading. She says the past cannot be buried forever. I know she is right. The light I have built here, the life of service, all of it stands on a foundation of lies. The truth claws at the edges of my mind. I fear what will come when it breaks through. The entries ended abruptly, as though the writer could no longer bear to commit more to the page. Keller set the journal down slowly, staring out the bedroom window as the words echoed in his mind. The ghost of my mother returned. But this time she did not weep. Whatever had passed between mother and son during that visit, it had irrevocably altered the fragile peace Nathan had built. And if Clara Raymond had indeed emerged from hiding after all these years, her appearance had triggered the final unraveling of a secret kept buried for decades. Now Keller and Grayson faced a new and urgent question. Had Clara vanished again? Or was she still out there, somehow close, pulling unseen strings behind Nathan's disappearances? The journal entry confirmed what Keller and Grayson now strongly suspected. Clara Raymond had returned after all these years, and her visit had triggered the cascade of events that led to Nathan Brooks' disappearance. The words, "She did not weep," carried a weight of finality that neither detective could ignore. But with Clara's reappearance now woven so tightly into the mystery, the next question was, where had she gone? Had she left town quietly, or had something dark inspired? As they debated their next steps, a new lead surfaced. Donna Mills, after hearing about the journal discovery, approached Keller the following morning with a hesitant expression. "There's something else," she said quietly. Pastor Brooks sometimes used the old church basement to prepare for retreats or to reflect. He said it helped him think. "Maybe you should take a look." Keller and Grayson exchanged a glance. The old basement beneath the original sanctuary, which had been decommissioned years ago when the new fellowship hall was built, had fallen into disuse. If Nathan had sought solitude or had secrets to hide, that would have been the perfect place. Within the hour they stood before the weathered double doors leading to the basement. The hinges creaked as they pushed them open, releasing a stale rush of cool air that smelled faintly of dust and earth. Flashlights in hand, they discovered the narrow steps, the beams slicing through the darkness. The main room was as Donna had described, dusty wooden benches, old hymnals stacked in forgotten corners, cobwebs strung like curtains across the ceiling beams. But Grayson's trained eye caught something out of place in the far corner, a section of wall that appeared newer than the surrounding structure. The cinder blocks bore faint scrape marks as though recently handled. "There," she said, moving closer. Keller joined her, running his fingers along the edge. It didn't take long to find a hidden latch, cleverly disguised as part of the molding. With a soft click, The section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow doorway. They exchanged a glance, then stepped inside. The concealed room beyond was small and cold, its stone floor worn smooth. At the center of the far wall hung a single object, a painting. Time had dulled its colors, but the image remained hauntingly clear. A portrait of a woman with striking silver hair and eyes that seemed to follow the viewer. The resemblance to the aged Clara Raymond was unmistakable. Beneath the painting, in faded red script, were the words, "She has returned." Grayson's breath caught. "He knew," she whispered. "I expected her," Keller nodded grimly. The symbolism of the painting, hidden away here, suggested that Clara's reappearance was not a surprise to Nathan. It was an event he had anticipated, perhaps even feared. They moved deeper into the room, the air growing colder with each step. In the center of the floor, partially obscured by dust and debris, lay another discovery, a small stone slab set into the earth, its surface engraved with care. Keller knelt, brushing away the dirt to reveal the inscription. The name read simply, Clara Raymond. Below it, a single date of death was carved, August 24th. Keller's heart skipped. The same date mentioned in the journal, the day Clara had visited Nathan. Grayson crouched beside him, her face pale. "This isn't just a memorial," she said softly. "This is a burial marker." The implications were chilling. If Clara Raymond had indeed died on the day she visited Nathan, then what had transpired between mother and son in those final hours? Had her death been natural, or had something more deliberate occurred? And why had Nathan sealed her memory away down here, beneath the old church? The weight of the discovery pressed heavily on them both. The hidden room, the painting, the marker, all pointed to a truth that was far more personal and tragic than either had anticipated. Clara had returned, and in doing so had forced Nathan to confront the very past he had spent a lifetime trying to outrun. Now the question remained, was this the final chapter of her story, or had its shadows reached even further into the mystery of Nathan's disappearance? The discovery beneath the old church had left Deputy Keller and Detective Grayson shaken. The hidden room, the haunting portrait, and the gravestone bearing Clara Raymond's name pointed to a truth far more personal and tragic than they had anticipated. Yet despite the weight of what they had found, one question remained painfully unresolved. Why had Nathan Brooks, once Ethan Raymond, vanished so suddenly after his mother's death? What final decision or burden had driven him to walk away from the life he had so carefully built? Determined to uncover more, the detectives returned to Nathan's house, driven by a growing sense that they had yet to uncover the pastor's true intentions. This time, their search focused on personal spaces, the study, the bedroom, even the living room where Nathan had often counseled members of the congregation. Hours passed with little result, frustration mounting, until a moment of chance shifted the investigation. As Keller shifted the worn cushions of the living room sofa, his hand brushed against an odd protrusion. Curious, he reached beneath the cushion and pulled free a thick envelope, its edges yellowed with age. The front bore a simple inscription in Nathan's careful handwriting. "For my daughter, should she ever find this." Grayson's eyes widened as she leaned closer. "Daughter?" Keller nodded grimly. "Looks like we're about to find out." They opened the envelope carefully. Inside lay a stack of handwritten pages, each line penned with deliberate care. The letter began with a quiet confession that quickly drew them in. "My dearest child, though I have never had the joy of knowing you, I write this in hope that one day the truth of who I am and what I have done will find its way to you. My name is not truly Nathan Brooks. I was born Ethan Raymond, a boy whose life was forever changed one night in Kansas when my mother took a desperate step to save us both." Keller and Grayson exchanged a glance, the letter confirming what they had already suspected. The words continued, heavy with the weight of memory. "My father, Charles Raymond, was a violent man. For years he filled our home with terror, his anger a constant shadow. My mother, Clara, tried to protect me, but there were limits to what love alone could do. On a storm-filled night when I was 10, after a particularly brutal beating, my mother fought back. She killed him. I do not know if it was planned or simply the final breaking point of her spirit. I only know that when it was over, she woke me in the dark and told me we had to run. That night, we vanished Grayson's breath caught as Keller read on. For years we lived like ghosts, different towns, false names. My mother taught me how to lie, how to disappear. I hated the deceit, but I loved her, and I feared the man whose absence haunted every shadow we crossed. Eventually the law caught wind of our trail. My mother, terrified of losing me, sent me away to a foster home under yet another name. She promised to come back for me. Weeks turned to months, months to years. I was told she had died. An accident, they said. I mourned her. I built a new life. I became a man of faith, seeking absolution for a past I could not fully name. But the past is not so easily buried. The letter continued, the tone shifting to one of revelation. Years later, in a town far from Kansas, I saw her again. Older, thinner, but unmistakably her. My mother had survived. She had lived under a false identity all those years, watching from afar, protecting me in ways I only came to understand with time. We met in secret. I forgave her, though forgiveness felt hollow in the face of what she had endured. From that day on, I helped her hide. I provided what I could, money, shelter when needed, but I kept my distance, fearing what would happen if the truth ever came fully to light. Grayson sat back, the letter resting lightly in her hands. He carried this all alone, she whispered. Keller nodded, his gaze heavy. And now we know why the visit broke him. She came back, and this time it was final. The last pages of the letter spoke of Clara's final visit, the moment recorded in Nathan's journal. She came to me, weary of running. She wished to set things right. I do not know what peace she found, but I know what her presence took from me. The life I built here, the truth I buried, it could no longer hold. The final line reads simply, "If you are reading this, my child, know that my love is yours, though it comes too late and through too much darkness." Keller exhaled, folding the letter with trembling hands. They now understood the depth of the pastor's hidden life. His childhood scarred by violence, his adulthood shaped by guilt and love twisted through necessity. But the letter also raised new questions. Who was the daughter Nathan had addressed? Did she truly exist? Or was she a symbol of the life he had never dared pursue? And most urgently, where had he gone, now that the fragile wall between past and present had finally crumbled? The letter left no doubt. Nathan Brooks had lived a life defined by shadows and sacrifices, his every step shaped by the desperate choices made by a terrified mother and a haunted child. The weight of that truth sat heavily with Deputy Keller and Detective Grayson as they reviewed each new piece of the puzzle. Yet one question still loomed above them all. Where had Nathan gone? And why had he vanished so completely after his mother's final return? They had no choice but to follow the last clear thread, the timeline of Clara Raymond's death. The gravestone beneath the old church listed her passing as August 24th, but no formal death record existed under her real name. Grayson, ever methodical, expanded the search to include area hospitals, nursing homes, and mortuaries, flagging any recent female deaths that fit Clara's likely profile and timing. The breakthrough came late one evening when an administrator at Pine Hollow Community Hospital, a small rural facility 15 miles outside Fairview, responded to their inquiry. "We did have a female patient who passed away on August 27th, the administrator said. Elderly, silver hair, frail, but she was admitted under the name Margaret Hale, which later raised some internal questions because the ID provided was very old and barely legible. There was no next of kin listed, only a contact number traced back to a prepaid cell phone found among Nathan Brooks's personal effects in the church office. Grayson and Keller drove to Pine Hollow the next morning. There, in a quiet administrative office, they reviewed the patient file for Margaret Hale. The admitting paperwork listed the next of kin as Nathan Brooks, guardian and son. The signature on the form matched Nathan's known handwriting. The attending nurse on duty that week confirmed further details. She came in alone with him, the nurse explained. He said she was very ill, wanted no extraordinary measures. He sat with her almost the entire time, very gentle. When she passed, he arranged everything through a local cremation service. Very private about it, Grayson frowned. And when did she pass? She died late on the 27th, the nurse replied. Complications from long-standing health issues. We discharged the remains to Mr. Brooks per his instructions. With patient privacy limits now waived under law enforcement request, Keller and Grayson reviewed the hospital's security footage. Hours of uneventful video played out, nurses going about their shifts, quiet halls, occasional visitors, until the night of August 27 a.m. The cameras captured Nathan Brooks entering the hospital's main corridor. His expression was drawn, his gait deliberate. In his arms, he carried a small, unmarked wooden urn. The cameras followed him through the quiet halls, down the elevator, and out through the side exit that faced a dense stretch of woodland behind the hospital. The timestamp on the footage marked his exit at exactly 3:12 a.m. No further footage captured him returning. No one saw him after that moment. Grayson checked the hospital's visitor logs and morgue records. Nathan had signed the final release forms, collected the ashes, and left without a word. We walked into those woods, Keller said quietly as the footage ended. And no one's seen him since. The implications were clear. Nathan had arranged his mother's cremation under a false name, ensuring no official trace would connect her to the long-cold Raymond case. He had then taken her ashes and disappeared into the forest in the dead of night, likely seeking a place only he knew, a place where the cycle of running and hiding could finally end. Back at the sheriff's office, Keller filed the final supplemental report. They issued a missing person alert for Nathan Brooks, though privately both he and Grayson doubted he wished to be found. In the days that followed, search teams combed the woods behind Pine Hollow with dogs and drones, but no trace emerged. No footprints, no discarded items, no sign of the man who had spent his life building a new identity from the wreckage of his past. Weeks later, as autumn began to strip the leaves from Fairview's trees, a small memorial service was quietly held at the church Nathan had once led. No mention was made of Ethan Raymond, no public reckoning with the buried truths that had come to light. For the congregation, Pastor Brooks remained a man of kindness, a man who had served them well until the very end. Only Keller, Grayson, and a small handful of others knew the full story, that beneath the steady voice from the pulpit had lived a boy forever shaped by fear, guilt, and love. In the stillness of the old church basement, the portrait of Clara Raymond remained. Beneath it, the simple stone marker bore silent witness to a cycle of flight and forgiveness that had spanned decades and ended, at last, beneath the forest canopy, where mother and son had finally parted once more. And somewhere beyond that line of trees, in the hush of the wilderness, a man carrying a small wooden urn had walked into darkness, seeking, perhaps for the first time, a peace he could finally call his own. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more mysteries like this, real stories that remind us how the past can linger in the quietest places. And now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think really happened to Pastor Brooks that night in the woods? Do you believe he found peace, or is there still more to this story we'll never know? Let me know in the comments below. And tell me, where are you watching from today? I'm always curious to see how far these stories travel. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.